Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Welcome to session 5 of the course, and in this session we'll look at the issue of production in an Islamic economy. But before we move to the issue of production, let's recap what we discussed last week. There are three types of ownerships in an Islamic economy. We have public assets, we have private assets, and we have Waqf assets or Waqf properties. So public properties are those properties which are not owned by any individual or household. Rather, they are owned by the entire society, and they are managed by the state or the government for the welfare of the people. These include assets or resources such as mineral resources, energy, water resources, forests, pasture lands, etc. The second type of resources are private resources, and these kind of resources are those which can be privately acquired and owned by the people. These include assets or resources such as houses, cars, factories, machines, means of production, etc. The third kind of asset or property is Waqf property, and this is when an asset has been endowed or removed from the private ownership for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but for a philanthropic or social cause such as supporting the community, the ummah, or the family. Now, these three kinds of ownerships are very important to understand because they are very closely related to the issue of production. Now, unlike a capitalist economy where the entire production or bulk of the production is done through the private sector, in an Islamic economy, goods and services are produced and distributed at three levels. So some goods and services are produced at the level of the government, i.e. government managing the public resources, producing goods and services for the benefit of the society. That's the first level. The second level is, and this I have shown as a big chunk of the economy because the private sector actually is the biggest component of the economy. So some of the goods and services are produced at this level, and some of the goods and services are distributed at the level of the Waqf. And in each of these levels, there are many differences in terms of the market structure, in terms of the pricing, in terms of the motivation. This we will look at in the following slides. But this is just to give you a high-level picture of the three components of an Islamic economy and the three kinds of ownerships in an Islamic economy and how those ownerships are related to the various kinds of production of goods and services. We'll come to that in the next slide. But let's look at the big chunk here, the big one, which is the private sector. And this is extremely important to understand. There are 6 ways in which assets could be acquired and owned privately. Now, the first way by which assets could be privately owned is through an exchange contract. And what does exchange mean? It means the creation of a market economy in which people produce and exchange goods and services in the market through contracts. And exchange contracts by definition create value. This is because one party is exchanging something for something else. Now, no one would give away a property unless the other property which he gets in exchange is more valuable. So in an exchange contract, for example, I could exchange 2 kilos of bananas for a kilo of apple. Now, in my view, 2 kilos of bananas are more valuable. So I give up 1 kilo of apples for 2 kilos of bananas. Or I could just exchange 2 kilos of bananas for $5, and that would mean that 2 kilos of bananas are more valuable to me than $5. So in an exchange contract where the market is fair and then there is no imbalance of power, both parties gain value from an exchange contract. So this is the first kind of method by which property can be acquired in an Islamic economy. The second type is gifts. Now this is a one-will contract where one party gifts something to another party. So a gift also makes you the owner of that gift. The third type is inheritance. So Islam has a detailed inheritance system. So whatever the heirs receive as their share of inheritance, that is permissible for them, and that gives them legitimate ownership of those properties which they acquire in the inheritance. The next is the entitlement rights. Now, entitlement right means that if you own something and that something grows or increases in value, so you also own the increment or the increase. So for example, if you have an animal and that animal gives birth to offsprings, then you own that animal as well as the offspring. So that's called as the entitlement rights. You are entitled to whatever grows from your asset. Number 5 is revival of unclaimed or barren land or dead land. That's another way. So if there is a barren land, unutilized land, and somebody brings it to life, somebody makes it productive, then that person becomes the owner of that dead land. So it's called as ihya ul mawat in the fiqh literature. So if you would revive a dead land, you become its owner. So that's another way by which you become a legitimate owner of a private property. And finally, the last way to acquire property in Islam is by tort. Tort is the compensation of injury, for example, or the victim's family. If there is a case of homicide, the victim's family can receive money as blood money as compensation. So that is also a legitimate form of ownership. So these are the 6 ways in which property can be privatized legally. So we've looked at the 3 types of ownerships, i.e. the public, private and Waqf ownerships. And now we will look at the production function of each. Now what is production? Production is the process of converting inputs into outputs. So different kinds of inputs are brought together. So raw materials, labor, land, and the machines, they are brought together to produce goods and services. So production is the process of transforming the inputs into outputs. Now production takes place at 3 levels: the public sector, the private sector, and the Waqf sector. So we'll look at each one of these now in detail. So let's look at the public production first of all. We mentioned already that resources such as water, pasture, energy resources are public properties. They are owned by the society. They cannot be privatized. However, they are managed by the state for the welfare of the people. So the primary motive of public production is non-profit. So the intention here is not to make a profit. Rather, the focus is only on charging the cost of production. And the examples are utilities such as water, gas, and energy. So when the government manages these resources, it will only charge the consumers the actual cost of the production. Okay, so the pricing mechanism is to cover the cost only, cost recovery, and the objective is to provide the essential services at affordable costs. As you mentioned, these are government controlled and managed for the welfare of the people. And these public resources have universal access. They are available to the Ummah, and they are not privatized or in the hands of a few people. The benefit should be universal and accessible to the citizens. So let's now look at the second form of production, which is the Waqf production. And as you mentioned, Waqf is typically not considered as owned by anybody, rather is considered as in the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, it could be said that the Waqf is owned by its objectives, because the Waqif, the person who endows an asset or declares an asset as Waqf, he sets the objectives of the Waqf. So it could be said that the Waqf is owned by its objectives and managed by mutawallis or nadirs, the managers of the Waqf. And typically, the purpose of the Waqf is philanthropic. It's providing philanthropic goods and services. The focus is on the welfare of the community and the community service, and there is no profit motive. The motive is exclusively philanthropic and social. Some of the examples are soup kitchens, caravansarais, schools, hospitals, madrasas, etc. So in terms of the pricing mechanism, it's either free or there might be a minimal cost associated with the Waqf goods and services. There is minimal or no competition with other market participants, and the financial model of the Waqf is funded through donations by the philanthropists. So let us now move on to the third sector of the economy, which is the private sector, and we'll spend some time in this because there are a lot of concepts and ideas that have to be discussed here. So in the domain of private resources or private property, we said there are 6 ways by which private property is acquired, and we said it's through exchange, gifts, inheritance, entitlement rights, revival of dead lands, and tort or compensation. So these are the ways by which a person acquires private property. Now, once a person has the property and he would like to grow the property, so he would like to invest and grow the property. So what are the legitimate ways by which the property can grow? And broadly, there are 3 ways by which the property can be invested for growth. The first way to increase the property is through sale-based contracts. The second category by which you can grow your assets or invest your assets is through leasing-based contracts. And number 3 is partnership contracts. Now, once you have acquired assets, whether it's through exchange, gift, inheritance, and so on, and you would like to grow it, you could enter into sale-based contracts. So these are all the contracts such as the regular sale, which is hand-to-hand, or it could be a murabaha sale, it could be a forward sale. So you could earn profit and increase your income through various kinds of sale-based contracts. So this course is not about Islamic finance, so I will not delve into the various kinds of contracts, but just to know that you could sell your asset in different ways to grow your capital, to grow your wealth. The second way, of course, is to lease. So you have an asset, you can lease it. You have a machine, you can lease it, and that's how your wealth will grow. And the third kind is partnership. And partnership could have various forms. Again, there are multiple structures. So one way could be musharaka. In musharaka, you have multiple partners coming together and sharing the profit and loss. You have the mudaraba, where you have one person or more who invest the capital, who invest the money, and then there is an active partner or the manager who manages the assets and makes an income. And then there is also muzara'a, which could be the sharing of the crop. So one person does the agriculture, and then there is the landowner and an investor. So they share the crop in some pre-agreed ratio. So there are different kinds of partnerships, but these are broadly the main three categories by which you can grow your assets. So let us now look at the various combinations possible for production. So first of all, if you want to produce something, what are the factors of production, or what are the inputs of production? So as in conventional economics, there are four factors of production. You have the land, you have the labor, you have the capital, and you have the entrepreneur. Now, various combinations of these four factors of production are possible. So typically what would happen is, let's say this guy is an entrepreneur, is a risk-taking businessman who also invests his capital. So he brings in two inputs to the production process. So he comes up with ideas, he's the risk taker, and also he brings the money capital, which is used to buy assets. So let's say there is a factory which this businessman wants to establish, or a workshop. So he first goes and leases a plot of land. Okay, and now he needs to build some factory or a workshop. So he invests that capital in that plant and equipment. He could either own it, he can buy it for cash. So in that case, this would be like the physical capital, or he could lease these machines from a lessor. So that would be the two options available. So he could either purchase those machines and plant, or he could lease them. And the final component is he needs some labor to work on this land. Now again, this could be risk-taking labor. So labor, i.e., he is a partner in the business. So that would be a mudaraba structure, where the labor would share the profits of the asset of the enterprise, or the labor could be a fixed wage labor who will earn a salary or a wage regardless of the performance of the business or regardless of the profits. So these are the four factors of production which go into the production process. So what are the returns? Now, this businessman has brought in his own capital, his money, and his entrepreneurship, his skills and business acumen, as well as he's the risk taker. And he has leased the land, so he will pay a rent for the land. and he has brought some labor, so he would pay a wage to the laborers. So the return on the land is rent, and the return on the labor is wage. And he would produce something. He would produce an asset, and that asset would be sold in the market, and then this guy would get the sales revenue. Now this revenue, the money, would be shared. Now the laborers would get their wages from the sales. The landowner will be paid the rent, and the residual income, so sales minus the wages minus the rent, would be the profit. Now will be the profit, and that profit will be pocketed by the entrepreneur who had invested his capital and time, and he had taken risk of this business. So this businessman will take the profit. So there could be various options. As I said, this labor could be a partner, or this labor could be a fixed wage labor. These machines could be owned, or these machines could be leased. So if these machines are leased, of course you would also pay the rent of the machine. The rent of the machine. So that's how you would pay the factors of production their compensation. Now there is no interest, so there is no reward for interest. So any reward is for the risk-taking element, which is the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur gets the residual income after paying all the fixed costs related to the various factors of production. So this is in summary the production process. It's quite similar to the conventional analysis. However, what is ensured here is that there is no interest. So interest or money capital is not part of the production process. So this capital actually is physical capital, or what has been converted. So the money does not deserve any reward. So any reward is when it is converted into a machine or plant or equipment or raw materials. So that is what is getting the reward. The money does not deserve a reward. So it's the risk, it's the deployment in the physical capital which is deserving a reward, and of course the entrepreneurial skills and risk is getting the reward of the business. So that is the Islamic factors of production and the returns. And as I said, there could be various combinations of these factors of production to produce certain goods. So let's look at the production in the private sector. So we've looked at the three forms of ownerships, and we've looked at how production takes place in the context of the public properties as well as the Waqf properties. Now we're moving on to the private sector and how production takes place in the private sector. Now we said any economic system answers the questions of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. So in the realm of the private sector, the question of what to produce is answered by the market mechanism. And let me explain what the market mechanism is. This is the demand curve. People in the society, they demand certain goods and services, and demand consists of two things. Demand, of course, is the desire by the people and the ability to pay. So some people could have the need, could have the desire to have a certain good, however they don't have the money to purchase. So that of course will not be part of the market mechanism. There are other arrangements which are beyond the market, or extra market relationships, which we will look at later within the context of distribution and redistribution. But for now, in the context of production, we are dealing with the demand and supply, and demand is the desire as well as the ability to pay. So once consumers express this desire in the market, then the suppliers, the producers, would supply that commodity, and there will be a market clearing price which will be determined by the forces of demand and supply. In this context, a couple of important points to remember. Now, first of all, we said in the previous lectures that the goods, according to the Islamic classification, can be categorized into daruriyat, hajiyat, and tahsiniyat. Now, daruriyat and hajiyat are really the essentials, the bare minimums which are required to lead the life, and tahsiniyat are the embellishments which improve the quality of life. Since israf and tabdhir are haram, israf and tabdhir, i.e. extravagance, and conspicuous consumption. Now this is called as conspicuous consumption in economics, which means that the consumption is not intended for its own sake, rather the consumption is intended to impress somebody external and to flaunt the wealth or flaunt the status. Now this in the Islamic paradigm is an impermissible, and the Islamic consumer, we hope, if the system of education and the system of tarbiyah and tazkiyah is in place, it is expected that these wants for the conspicuous goods and services will be curtailed by the internal institutions, by the beliefs and the value system of the Muslims. Now that would mean that the demand would be either limited to the daruriyat and the hajiyat, the essentials, or the tahsiniyat. And this demand curve would comprise of those three things. The second important concept in this, in the context of private production, is the concept of the marginal propensity to consume. Now, in the Islamic economy, zakat is centralized, is collected and distributed by the government. Now, this is taken from the wealth of the rich and distributed to the poor, the fuqara and the masakin, in addition to, of course, other categories of people. So there are 8 categories of zakat recipients. However, the first two are the fuqara and the masakin, the needy and the poor, who will get this zakah. Now these poor people, the poor have a higher marginal propensity to consume. This means that out of the $1,000, if the poor are spending 90%, that means their marginal propensity to consume is 90% or 0.9, which means for every $1,000 they spend $900. Now the poor are going to spend these $900 on the essentials, on the daruriyat and the hajiyat, which will create demand for the essentials. So all of this goes back to the
to the demand curve. So this zakat will create a demand for essential goods. The other side of the marginal propensity to consume is the marginal propensity to save. So if 90% is the MPC of the poor and the needy, then the MPS, the marginal propensity to save, is 10%. So out of every $1,000, the poor will save $100. So in the low income groups, typically the marginal propensity to consume is high, and that means the higher marginal propensity to consume creates demand for goods, and then when there is a demand and the ability to pay, then the producers will supply those goods at the market price. Now it is assumed that because of the values of the people as well as the distributive mechanisms in the economy, there will be sufficient demand for the essentials, and because of that demand, the suppliers will produce the essentials, the daruriyat, the hajiyat and the tahsiniyat, and the resources will not be allocated towards the luxurious and conspicuous goods and services. However, let's say there is a group of very wealthy people in the economy, and the producers are producing luxury goods and services, and all the resources of the economy are being diverted away from the production of essentials to the production of luxuries. So let's say this group of people, they need fancy villas and townhouses, they need luxury bags and luxury cars, and the whole economy and the manufacturing is done to please these people. Now if that's the case, and the values of the people are not motivating them to produce the essentials, now there is a case for active intervention by the government. So the market mechanism is important, however it's not supreme, it's not sacred. In case where there is an insufficient quantity of the essentials in an economy and a diversion of the resources towards luxuries, then the government may intervene to improve the quantity supplied of the essentials. Now there could be various ways by which the government can divert the resources from the luxuries to the production of essentials. One way we said, of course, is through the education and developing this sense of cooperation and concern for the society. Another way could be the provision of subsidies so that the essentials are produced. There could be various ways by which the government can promote the production of essentials before moving on to the luxuries. So there is a case for government intervention where there is a serious misallocation of resources towards the production of luxuries. So in that case, the government can intervene to produce the essentials. However, as a general case, as a base case, the market mechanism should be able to take care of itself and produce the essentials and the non-essentials and the embellishments and the necessary goods and services through the market mechanism. The production in the private sector is motivated by profit. It is driven by the forces of supply and demand. The goods produced are the essentials and the non-essentials, the daruriyat, hajiyat and tahsiniyat. We've covered these in a previous session. The pricing mechanism is influenced by supply and demand. The objective of the producer is mainly profit. However, after a certain level of profit, as an Islamic producer, they would have some benevolent objectives. In addition, as stewards of the earth, they would have responsibility towards the environment, towards the employees, towards the customers. So they would have to take care of those social concerns. But despite that, there will be always a profit motive for production in the marketplace. So profit is acceptable. It's a reward to the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is a factor of production, and profit is a return to that factor. Now, an important point here is that the Islamic market is supposed to be competitive, and it will be dominated by what's called as the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises. Now, historically in the Islamic economy, we've always had small enterprises. That's been the norm. And in the future Islamic economy also, small and medium enterprises will be the norm. First of all, there are many benefits of SMEs. First is it diversifies and broadens the ownership of the means of production. So it helps to distribute the productive assets across the economy. It avoids the concentration of wealth and helps in distributing the wealth among the society. The second important point in the context of SMEs is the bargaining power. So if there are many SMEs producing goods and services, there will be competition in the market, and that competition will ensure that the prices remain within a reasonable range. Because if there is a monopolistic or a oligopolistic situation where there is only one firm or a few firms that produce goods and services, they would have a lot of market power, and with that market power they would be able to exploit the consumers, exploit the employees, which of course is a form of injustice and unacceptable in an Islamic economy. So these SMEs will be small and medium to ensure that the market is competitive, the prices are fair and reasonable, the wages are fair and reasonable. So an Islamic economy would have more SMEs and no monopolies or oligopolies to have fair competition and a fair market. So the next point is some historical context. When the Prophet ﷺ made hijrah from Mecca to Medina, soon after he established a market, an Islamic market. There was already an existing market in Medina which was controlled by the Jews. The Prophet made an Islamic market with Islamic rules. This is one of the first things he did after establishing masajid, one in Quba and one in Medina. He established an Islamic market, and some of the features of that market were as follows. So there was free entry, so there were no barriers to entry. People were allowed to enter and exit the market. This market was free of taxes. So in an Islamic economy, taxes are impermissible as a general rule. Taxes are very specific for specific purposes. So whenever there is a need, there might be taxes, but those taxes are not a general rule. They are intended for specific purposes, and they are taken from the rich mainly to fulfill certain needs of the economy. The third point is price discovery. The people are prohibited from going outside the market to receive the traders who are bringing goods and making preemptive contracts with them. So it is required that the price is discovered in the market. So people who are coming from, the traders are coming from abroad. So since they are not aware of the market price, there could be some exploitation or some differences of opinion. So what is required is that the price is discovered in the market. So once the trader or the businessman comes inside the market, so the consumers and the producers would know exactly what the prevailing market price is, and the price is discovered in the market. So in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade making preemptive contracts outside the market with traders who are bringing goods and services. So market is, as I mentioned, a free place for exchange without any form of external or authoritative influence. There is no extraordinary or abnormal market power of any single participant or a group of participants. The market is competitive, and all efforts are exerted to make sure that the market remains competitive and free of any authoritative influence. So with regard to the pricing, we have a hadith reported by Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anh, who said that on one occasion the people said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the prices have shot up, so fix the prices for us. And the Prophet, he refused. He said, Allah is the one who fixes prices, and I wish to meet Allah while none of you will have any claim against me for an injustice regarding blood or property. So as a general rule, price fixing is impermissible, and Prophet ﷺ categorically said that the price will be set by Allah. Allah is the fixer of the price. Here what it means is, Allah is the fixer of the price means the natural process of demand and supply should determine the prices in the marketplace. And this is a very categorical teaching of Islam, much before Adam Smith or the classical economic tradition. Now, as we mentioned, the market is important, however it's not supreme. There could be a need for some intervention by the state if there is an insufficient production of the essentials, and if there is a misallocation of resources towards luxuries to the extent that people are being deprived of the essential goods, then there is a case for the state to intervene and ensure that the essentials are produced in sufficient quantities. Now some more points about the Islamic market. There are some prohibitions which we are aware of. So first of all, there shall be no production of goods and services which are considered as haram or harmful. That's number one. So things like the production of alcohol or drugs or other prohibited goods and services will not be produced in an Islamic market. So gambling is prohibited, so gambling will be excluded. Riba will be excluded. There will be no riba in an Islamic market. And similarly, we mentioned that there will be SMEs, and that will be the norm. So monopolies or oligopolies will not be allowed, since they can be exploitative. So we would like to ensure competition in the market to ensure fair prices for all the stakeholders. Similarly, for pricing, we said there cannot be any price fixing. The prices will be determined by the natural forces of demand and supply. As long as they are natural, they are not distorted, the prices will be determined by the market mechanism. There will be a focus on the essentials, as we said, because of the wider distribution of wealth, as well as the distribution of zakat. The people will have income, they will express their demand, and then the suppliers will try to meet that demand through the market mechanism. And the role of the state, of course, is to ensure the availability of the essentials and enforce fair market practices. So in this context, there is an institution of Hisbah, which is the accountability. Now, this institution of Hisbah ensures that the market remains fair, and this has been historically practiced. And in Islamic history, there was always a muhtasib, an enforcer, an ombudsman, who ensured that the market remained fair and free of deceit and fraud and any kind of exploitation. So we would have the institution of Hisbah to ensure fair market practices. So we've come to the end of this session. This week we looked at the Islamic perspective on production. We saw the theory of production. We saw the Islamic market and the rules governing it. We looked at the three sectors of the economy, i.e. the public, the private, and the Waqf, and how production is carried on in each of these sectors of the economy, and what are the features of the private, public, and the Waqf sector production. Last week we looked at the pre-production or the initial conditions of an Islamic economy. Inshallah, in the coming weeks we will be looking at the issue of distribution from an Islamic perspective and the issue of redistribution. Distribution refers to the distribution of the output or the money from the sales between the factors of production, i.e. the landowners, the workers, the entrepreneurs, and the capital owners. So how the income of the output is distributed among the factors of production, that's called as the theory of distribution. And then finally we look at redistribution, which is a mechanism for allocating resources beyond the market. So there is no exchange involved, rather there are other mechanisms and devices to redistribute wealth and income in an economy.